Good morning, everyone. This is Mark Masechko from the Miami University Alumni Association, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to Alumni Weekend, which is connecting Miamians all over the country for fun and engaging programming and conversations, and of course, celebrating you, our alumni. It wouldn't be Alumni Weekend without this lecture and this presenter. The evolution of our campus and its student life and Bob Keller are staples of Alumni Weekend. And we're so excited to bring this session directly to you, wherever you may be this morning.
Hey, Mark, good morning.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us. So Bob, those of you who don't know, Bob was the university architect and campus planner at Miami University from 1989 until his retirement in October of 2012, where he served as the director of the Division of Planning, Architecture, and Engineering. Well, that's a mouthful. Overseeing a long range of capital planning in all phases of major construction for all campuses. In 2010, he was appointed the position of Associate Vice President for Facilities, Planning, and Operations of the university. In his new role, his responsibilities were expanded to include the management and operation of all utility systems, building maintenance, grounds, custodial services, and special facilities. Bob is now retired and lives here in Oxford with his wife, Nancy, where he remains active as Miami University Architect Emeritus with special design projects, guest lectures, obviously, for the Department of Architecture and the Alumni Office, and presentations on his ongoing campus history research. It's also important to note that Bob is a Miami alumnus, class of 1973 or 72, Bob?
I started with 72. I finished up with 73.
All right.
We'll go into that now.
All right. That's perfect. So Bob will address questions throughout his presentation. So if you have a question, please click on the Ask a Question link below the video. And please note that we may not get to every question. We'll do our best to get to most of them and as many of them as possible. This webinar is sponsored by the Knolls of Oxford, and it'll last about 90 minutes. At the end of this session, we will be inducting the classes of 1970 and 1971, and we're inducting them into the Hughes Society. So it will be a full and packed 90 minutes. So with that, let's get started. Bob, the floor is yours.
All right. Thanks a lot, Mark. I appreciate that. It's good to be here again this year with everyone. I really wish that I could be looking out across a lecture hall somewhere and seeing you looking back, but that's not the case. But I think we'll have a good time anyway. And I've got a lot of slides. As you might guess, looking at, this is 2021. We have about 212 years worth of history that we're going to go through this morning. I won't elaborate on a lot of it because it is a lot to cover. But if there is something that I'm talking about that I'm showing you pictures of or whatever, and you think you want to know more about that, feel free to let Mark know, and I'll try to address that, and we'll go to that. So without further ado, we're going to start way back from a single log schoolhouse built in 1811. Going through the years, we'll talk about the development of the physical campus, the buildings themselves as they went through, starting with a little dirt road that came through town. We'll talk about student life from students in the very earliest of days where they had wood burning fire or stoves or fireplaces in their rooms up to modern day. We'll talk a little bit about national and international politics and how that affected the campus and student life. Civil War was certainly one of those that had a large impact. We will talk about transportation development and the effects that had on Oxford and the campus and the way that the students came and went to various places. We'll talk about a little bit of Uptown. Wouldn't be Alumni Weekend without talking about Uptown Oxford, going up High Street. We'll reminisce a little bit there. And eventually we will get to just the whole, we'll cover advents of sports, women students, social academic changes, and eventually bring us up to the way the campus looks today, the highly ranked and nationally recognized institution that it is. And we have well over 7 million square feet now. I've been retired for a few years and they're still busy adding more square footage. So we're probably close to somewhere near 7.5 million. Someone can update me on exactly what that is. But to get started, we will, let me get my camera there, start with slant wall gates, Fidel gates. We all know this image and we've seen that, but we're going to go back a little bit, not too many years ago. The gates look like this. I think there are gates behind that landscaping that was kind of out of control. This is an earlier image. You can see some nice herringbone brick patterns going down slant walk there. These are the Centennial gates were built in the Centennial year around that time, dedication from the classes. Still nice, but before that even, these were the gates that were there. And at one time they actually did have swinging gates on them. If we zoom in a little bit and look at this picture, we can see a couple of things. One, we'd started the signage program already. If you look up here, they had a wooden sign nailed onto the side of a tree, and the students weren't walking on the sidewalks any more then than they do today, but we give it our best effort. Before that, it was just a dirt path down into campus, and before that, there weren't any gates. So we'll start back at that point in time and work our way forward again. Charter for the Miami University was February 17th, 1809, when the township, Oxford Township, was dedicated to the university for them and to rent those spaces out as a means of income. Oxford Township is located in the far northwest corner of Butler County. There's the square mile. Square mile was actually laid out in 1810. That's when the first stake was placed. We all still hear about the mile square, and the borders are still identifiable if you're familiar with that. But even back at this time, in this very early map, even though there were streets there weren't many buildings. But they had an area called the University Square that they had identified, which is, I can give you this, this is High Street going right across the middle. This is Campus Avenue going up and down through there. It was called East Street at that time. But that was identified as University Square. Right next to it was the College Grove. I'm not exactly sure what they meant precisely by that, but it was there. And then interesting, the Botanical Gardens up above that, and that square I just added is actually where the formal gardens are today. So it hasn't changed that much as far as location and layout of things. That first log cabin was built right there where that red square just appeared. It was a schoolhouse. It certainly wasn't a university, but it was started to educate children in the area. And that was in 1811. A couple of other structures came up. They were right off of Walnut Street there to the left, but really not much in that area. If you look in that direction, this is a rendering we found that shows that log schoolhouse. I don't think it actually looked like that in 1811. I'm sure that fence wasn't there. Didn't have those nice Mediterranean-looking tall columnar trees in there, but it probably looked something more like this. Really a deep forest. It was totally undeveloped in this area, and the log cabin probably looked something like that when Major James Maxwell Dorsey appeared in 1811, brought his family in, and they started up school. But before you knew it, the War of 1812 came along. He re-enlisted back to the U.S. Army, and off he went to the war, and that sort of delayed the startup of formal education. These were some of the buildings that had developed by that time. In 1819, they actually did build a fairly sizable structure, that brick structure you can see behind the log cabin there. It was called Franklin Hall. It was a preparatory school. But it was really not until 1824 when Old Main was built. Later, we call that Harrison Hall. Miami University officially opens. We had 58 students to that first class in the fall of 1824. So although we were actually founded in 1809, it took 15 years to get things up and going and developed to have our first college level classes.
Hey, Bob.
Yes.
We got a question that came in. I want to make sure we got to it before we got too far away from the log cabin.
Sure.
So Dennis from 1980 asked, does or shouldn't Miami have a historical marker at the actual site of the original log schoolhouse?
Yeah, that's a good question. And at one point in time, they might have done that. I think today there are buildings over that site. There is no marker there. That's the north part of King Library today. Gotcha. Is where that is. It would be nice to have some replica or something there to mark that. And it was actually there and existed for a few decades. It got the nickname as the President's Mansion over time, and the students all referred to it that way. Not much of a mansion, but yeah, that's we can bring that up to one of our committees, Mark.
Perfect. Yeah. Thanks, Bob.
Memorials, sure. So Robert Bishop, the first president of the university, 1824, and he actually was president for 17 years to 1841. Enrollment steadily increased. In the first year, we nearly doubled our enrollment up to 111. You see, keep going up to 151. We built a dorm, a full dorm, a North Dorm in 1828. In 1836, we added our second dorm. There they are. In the North Dorm, we call Elliott Hall today, and the South Dorm is Stoddard Hall. So those are both there, and Harrison Hall is in that the same basic location where what they called Old Main existed at that time. Here are a couple of woodcut engravings of Stoddard Elliott, some nice images there. If we go in a little bit and look at this, you can see all the chimneys up in the roof where the stoves and the fireplaces exhausted. And this is an actual image of Stoddard in the early days. I'd say that was late 1800s, early 1900s when that picture was taken. Here's a view from up the top of the towers of Harrison looking across to the east. If you look way over up there in the right-hand corner, you can actually see Peabody Hall back there that was in existence when this picture was taken. And the road did not go in front of Stoddard Elliott as it does today. It wound actually between the two buildings. A great image of that first building and Elliott Hall there in the background. There's the chapel. You can see that there's the arched windows there on the part showing the closest to us, and that's where the chapel was. The spiritual life of the students and the church itself was very important. It started as a Presbyterian church, and probably about half the students in the early days either became ministers or doctors or teachers. There's a morning chapel. The students were required to go to morning chapel every day. I think it was about 6 or 7 a.m. This was a library. Literary societies started in 1825. The Union and the Aradelphian. These were forerunners to the fraternities. But then the fraternities, as you can see, started shortly thereafter. And off we go from there. This is the earliest known photograph of the campus, 1858. This is where the well was. You can see the university well was there at that time. And it was there for a long time, and that's where everybody got their water. By this point in time, we'd gone through a few presidents. After Bishop left in his long tenure, we went through 2 or 3 presidents pretty quickly. One of note here, that's Erasmus McMaster. He didn't get along with the students very well at all. He was a real disciplinarian. They had disagreements about things. We had a smallpox outbreak. He refused to close the university down, and students were upset about that. We can kind of relate to that today. And then there's the Snowball Rebellion in 1848. That was up on the mural in the Heritage Room, and I'm sure most of you remember that. There's an image down there in that corner of the Snowball Rebellion. And with some research, I found out it was a pretty significant event, not just a prank, although it was, but the students filled up Harrison Hall, Old Main at that time. It froze. It took them several days to get the building opened back up again where they could have classes. President McMaster was not happy at all. They found out the students. They brought them in one by one and grilled them to find out who was behind the thing. The bottom of it, 30 students were expelled as a result of that. The senior class diminished from 20 to 9 and the junior class from 12 to 5. He was getting them out of here. The enrollment plummeted to 68 students. So it really was, it was a real shock to our system and to the university and a real threat to us continuing. But with President John Hall that came around in 1854 to 66, he steadily grew the enrollment back. And at one point we were at 266. And when he was finished up, we were at 225. So back on our way. June 4th, 1859 was significant for the campus and significant for the town of Oxford. It was when the first train arrived from Hamilton. It became an important place for the students, an important place for the town. It's where the mail was delivered. Set times, people knew when the mail and the newspapers were coming in. It was a time when people gathered. They said, we need to be at the train station at this time. And it was one of the highlights. There weren't any student centers or anything at that time, but that served as part of that. And then, unfortunately, along comes the Civil War, the breakout of the Civil War. The university had about 25% of our students were from the South, the Deep South. 180 students plus or minus at one point in time at the high point. 160 students volunteered for the University Rifles. It really divided the campus up on that mural. There was also, you saw the students who were from the South marching and getting ready to go to the South to to support the Confederacy, and the students from the North, of course, were going to Columbus area with university rifles to do that. But despite all the successes that we had in the early decades, and there were a lot up until the 1860s, 1870s, of course, McGuffey was a professor here, and the famous McGuffey Readers. In 1839, Miami was the fourth largest university in the country. People don't realize the importance that Miami played at that time. There were 13 of the generals in the Civil War were from Miami. They were Miami grads. 11 alumni became U.S. representatives. 7 became U.S. senators. 6 were foreign ministers. 5 were governors. We had a U.S. Supreme Court justice, the United States president, with Harrison, Benjamin Harrison. So a very important impact on the country. After the Civil War, it was catastrophic. We had a President Hepburn that was the president after that. During that time, the enrollment plunged from 266 of a high down to 87. There were a lot of problems. I see I've got 3 S's in my classical curriculum up there. I have to correct that. But that was losing favor, and the university was slow to adjust, or the president was. Women were joining, admitted to universities in the East. President Hepburn was adamantly opposed to that, so he was not admitting women to the university. That was a problem. There was a U.S. financial panic in 1873 that was a crisis across the country. And in the fall or the spring of 1873, when we closed the doors, they did not reopen in 1874. The university did not open. So despite all of the activities, the various activities that were going on, at that point in time, in the fall of 74, it was bare. No classes at all. Students did not return. They were back at wherever they had come from, the various places. Chapels were empty. No classes for 12 years, actually. The university was closed for 12 years. It affected the Uptown too, which had one time been very vibrant. There's High Street, and you can see the square up on the left there. But things slowed down there as well, affected them very much. Miami was not unique with this closure, though. Actually, across the country, 412 universities and colleges closed and did not survive, never opened again. So we're fortunate that Miami did. Our Miami trustees were persistent. They kept meeting throughout that 12-year period of time, raising funds, trying to get enough money to get the university back open. A lot of support from the alums, and we had a lot of very distinguished alums, as you can see, as I was mentioning a little bit ago, that were supportive of the university. So fortunately, in 1885, we opened it back up under the guidance of President Robert McFarland. He had been on the faculty when the university closed, so he knew the school very well, knew many of the other faculty. We had only an enrollment of 50, but the good news is we opened the doors back up, and our university custodian, Farty Devine, reopens the doors. You got to clean up the campus again, and they did. There was much excitement about getting students back in the area, clean up the dining halls, and here are the students. I can just see them coming back, getting back into Stoddard Elliott Halls, and he's talking about trying to get the students psyched up about this. Yeah, we need to do this. Let's get something going. He wants a football team. Now, when it's live, I usually get a few laughs with this. I'm just going to assume, and Donna Bowen assured me that we'd be laughing at these jokes, so we'll do it the best we can. Ethelbert Warfield, president in 1888. He arrives on campus. He's from the East Coast. He and his faculty were known as the East Coast Dudes. He brought football to the school, so the students were getting their request. And there's the 1891 football team on the south lawn of campus. You can see Stoddard Hall there in the background. There's the faculty that he brought with him, mostly East Coast as well. And that had an impact on the students and on the camp or the town. They brought new styles, new fashion, new ideas from the upper Northeast down to this Midwest, and still considered a part of the frontier kind of area. Students the teams at that time were not limited to student athletes. Anyone from the university could participate. So the faculty played, even President Warfield played in many of the football games. This is the class of 1891, really dapper looking graduating class. This is what the university is looking like at that point in time. It's a layout. You can see Old Main, the Harrison Hall there, Stoddard Elliott, a couple of other buildings coming along. 1892, Bryce Hall was built, the first significant building on campus really since 1836. So it was certainly due. Senator Calvin Bryce donated the funds so this new structure could be built. It was a scientific building, and the sciences were becoming much more a part of the curriculum at this point in time, so it was much needed. There you can see, looking up across campus, there's the Bryce Hall, Stoddard Elliott, and so forth in the background. You see there's Bryce. There's this dirt path going across from left to right on the screen. A little stone storm system there, and that is Spring Street. That's what Spring Street looked like at that time. The streets were still dirt streets there. When it rained, it got muddy. One other thing about that, you look at the campus, it's striking of how few trees were across the campus at that time. We're standing down at the corner of Spring and Campus on this image, and you can see all the way across campus. So I think we have a good idea where the students were getting their firewood to keep their rooms heated in the winter, and that was true. They were responsible for chopping their wood and keeping their rooms warm. Here's a little bit better image of the Mile Square area. We'll zoom in a little bit on some of that for another important thing that happened around this time. There's High Street. The campus area is down in here, and across High Street, the university expands in that direction. And if you look where that arrow is pointing, that's what you would see. We expanded across High Street and created the Miami Athletic Grounds in 1896. If you go into this, and we actually go right through that door, if you had a ticket to an event going on, that's what you would see on the other side. Back down there on the right-hand side is the back side of that entrance gate. And big, they were big events. They had, you can see there's some baseball there, there's football there, track and field events, people sitting up on the top of the fence around it, people dressed up in fine dresses and carriages. And there we have the football teams, track meets going on there. Students were really interested in the physical education side of things was becoming more important, and not just the academic curriculum. And the university was responding. Sure enough, then in 1897, they built the first gymnasium, the Miami Gymnasium. If you looked inside of the upper level up there, that's what you would see. Women were starting to come to the university at that time. Certainly Warfield and others were welcoming women students to attend. Nice building. Uptown, things were developing as well. That's the west side of the Uptown Square. They had a grocery store. They had a lumber office, furniture. Of course, you had to have a saloon. And there's a nice image of the inside of the grocery store. Here's a rendering of the campus. You can see Peabody again way back off in the distance there, but there was a main gate that came in off High Street. Here's High Street that came in and went in and around to the main buildings. Nice rendering. You can see McGuffey's house back there on the side. And this was pretty much the extent of the university at the close of the 19th century. The old main building had been developed more. The second tower was built. There was a east wing added to it, so it had been expanded. And that was done really at the turn of the century. Graduations were held up there, and this was a march on the road in front of Stoddard Elliott Halls. That's what the campus was looking like at that time, but there was still a lot of woods around, and it's still very much a university in the forest. Old traditions continued. This is High Street, but new things were on their way as well. The first vehicles started appearing in Oxford. We'll go into the early 20th century. David Tappan was the president, 1899 to 1902, a fairly short term as president, and there were a few that were that way. But then Guy Potter Benton comes along in 1902 to 1911. He really was a forward thinker, looking at growing the campus a lot more. He was president for 9 years, and he made a real impact. By the time he was leaving, we were up around 500 students at one point. So really expand the campus from less than 200 up to 500 during his tenure. So Bryce Hall was expanded in 1905. See that over on this side? It was like tripled in size. Many more women were enrolling. They were starting the normal school education, and many women were coming to become teachers. In fact, there were so many women, we decided needed to build the first dormitory. First dormitory appeared in 1906, I believe it was. If you remember this gentleman, Andrew Hepburn, He was the president back in 1871 to 73, and he was adamantly opposed to allowing women to Miami, so he probably wouldn't have liked this at all. So what did they do? They named the building after him. So the first women's residence hall on campus was named for the president, Hepburn Hall. He probably, well, yeah, you know the saying. The auditorium in 1908, we call that Hall Auditorium today. That was constructed, and see all the expansion was going on under Benton's guidance. The Normal College, that was the first part of McGuffey Hall. It was expanded over the next 10 or 20 years to become the building that it is today. But it started like that. A lot of women came. The percentage of female students really expanded. But it became nearly half of the enrollment. You see the campus down there and how they were starting to lay things out. This started to become the front of the campus a lot. There was an orientation in this direction. They held graduations in front of this Hepburn Hall when the weather permitted. And there's an image looking the other way, looking back up towards Hepburn Hall. They had a gateway there as well, a nice gateway. So in addition to Slant Walk, we had that one, and we had the one off High Street that were there at that time. Here's a picture of Hepburn later, ivy covered at that time, and a graduation occurring. 1909, a significant building, Alumni Library, was built. It was part of the Carnegie Foundation. It was Alumni Library because the deal was with the Carnegie Foundation, he was contributing to libraries across the country, and he would put up half of the funds required to build a new library. The alumni put up the other half in this case, and we got Alumni Library in 1909. Significant structure, very, very nice classical building on campus. You notice no Georgian kind of architecture at this point. It's all very classical architecture. There's the Alumni Library. It's the placement of that on an axis. We're starting to form the exterior spaces within the buildings. So someone
hey, Bob,
yes.
Got another question here. I'll let you take a breath for a second.
All right, I'll take a breath here.
Yeah, that's good. So Tim, class of 76, asked, he's basically asking, how did this compare to other universities at this point? Not necessarily size of student body, but the size of the campus, the number of buildings on campus. Was it similar to most other universities?
I think probably the East Coast universities were expanding quicker than we were. There were other universities obviously coming into existence. In the early days, it was just OU and Miami. Of course, Ohio State and other schools that started to develop. Cincinnati was starting to get schools. So there was more competition. I think one of the things that took Miami maybe a little more time to develop was the students from the Deep South after the Civil War didn't return. And it was a big part of our enrollment prior to that time. So we kind of had to adjust, where the students were coming. So I would say, it was holding its own, certainly. And under Benton's guidance, we got up to a few hundred students right away, but we were no longer the fourth largest in the country. Or anything like
Gotcha.
That. I don't know exactly where we stood. I'll look into that.
Perfect. Thanks, Bob.
Thanks for the question. That helps.
Yep.
Helps me know you're out there, audience. Okay, so we're looking at the heart of campus now, and some nice views of this. The yellow arrow there shows the direction. A little ahead of ourselves. I'm not going to get to every single building in this talk, but you can see there's a couple of other structures there, including Bishop Hall. A view in that direction. But the campus is taking shape now. In 1919, another sort of milestone for the campus in this development was they built a building on the south side of Spring Street. This is Spring across the bottom here. High Street's up there. And for whatever reason, and I don't know this, they decided to go south of Spring Street rather than developing what they had called the Grove. So maybe there was some sense that they wanted to leave the natural area close to campus and start expanding to the south. And there were some houses down there already, so that might have been it. In 1921, the next building came up, so they became East and West Halls. Actually, they were soon named Anderson and Stanton. So the first Stanton and Anderson Halls were those modest structures, not brick buildings. They were a stucco building. So they must have put them up pretty quickly with a quick increase in the enrollment of the campus. In 1923, McMillan Hospital was built. You might wonder why we needed a hospital. It was actually in response to the Spanish flu pandemic that swept the world back, what year was it? 1918, 1919, 1920, around the World War time, World War I period, and after that. So we had our hospital was there. In 1923, Wells Hall is built. That's a great image, I think, of Wells Hall looking across Spring. And yes, indeed, we've got the cars that are arriving on campus now, and that'll be something we'll start contending with there, and we'll contend with for the rest of the university, of cars on campus. And in fact, I can show that point a little bit more. Looking here, one of the things is I just added my little blue car here. You could actually drive through the campus at that point in time. There was a road that came off that main gateway, and they had a roundabout, believe it or not. But this was a road that you could drive up through Stoddard Elliott and back down to Spring Street if you desired. Well, I can just imagine one day somebody's driving along and comes in. That's got to be one of the faculties coming up, and they decide to stop and park behind. And that idea caught on real quick. The next thing you know, you've got a lot of them. And I found this picture, and I was kind of appalled actually to see that there were all these cars parked right on the south side of Harrison Hall, right in the middle of campus. So I'm sure they started thinking about traffic control. Probably need to start getting parking permits, and the saga begins with that debate. In 1923, a donor opportunity arose. There was a family that wanted to donate funds for a new women's dormitory, yet another one. So the enrollment percentage of women were still increasing. I think they had a daughter that was going to come to Miami. They were interested in doing that. They talked to the trustees and the alumni office, but they had one stipulation, and that was the residence hall had to be built west of Heron Gym. Well, Heron Gym, as you can see, is right up there, and they wanted it west of Heron Gym. So they had ideas on this nice site, the front yard of the university, across from Lewis Place, and they wanted their new structure to go there. Well, as you might guess, the president and the trustees weren't too excited about that idea, but they really were hesitant to turn down the donation. They needed the support of the alum and a family that was involved with it. So I can only imagine that the trustees meeting one time when someone had the idea, well, let's just raise Heron Gym up, put it on some wheels, and push it over out of the way, and then we can actually build our new building right there, right where Heron Gym was. So that sounds crazy, but I've got to tell you, I found this slide, and sure enough, that's exactly what they did. This is an image of them putting the Heron Gym up on rollers. I think if you look in here closely, they actually pulled it across toward the east. There are the rails set up there. A firm out of Cleveland somewhere were building movers.
Hey, Bob.
And you can see, yes.
I'll jump in here again real quick while we're talking about women. So this question came in. When was the first woman admitted to Miami, and what were the underlying factors that led to the change?
Woo, boy.
That's an intense question.
It is. And I don't know the exact date. I probably should. I believe Kurt Ellison knows the answer to that. He's done more research in that part of the campus history than I. I'm more on the physical side of it, as you might guess. But it was in the late 1800s. Certainly, I think I would say in the 1880s sometime.
Gotcha.
And there were very few initially. Some of them I know were maybe daughters of faculty, and they were letting some of them in. Interestingly, one of our first black students was a female, and I think again some connection there from Oxford. I should know more precisely, but that's about what I can tell you now. But the big thing that brought the women was the School of Education. Okay. It was a career that women could go to at that point in time, and they really did, and they wanted to. So I'd say late 1880s into the 1890s, and by the time we got into the early 1900s, Hepburn Hall was built by 1906, and it was a big building, and they needed that much space, and built ones after that. Bishop Hall came shortly after that. It was a women's residence hall, and then the one we're talking about right here, Ogden Hall. So
perfect.
Moving on.
Great, thank you.
So indeed, they did that. They raised Heron Gym and moved it east and built the building they wanted. Here's another view of it. Heron Gym, the way it was built in 1897, that's where it sat. They actually rolled the thing over there. They changed its name along the way sometime to Van Voorhis Hall, and that's what we knew it as when I was a student. And then Ogden Hall was built in 1924. True story. Here's the earliest aerial image I've been able to find of the campus, and we'll zoom in a little bit more in here as well. And if you look in the upper left-hand corner of the screen, you can see the new Ogden Hall there and the location of Van Voorst. In fact, if you look really close, I think you can see it almost looks like those rails, the tracks of those are still there. So it must have been done shortly after that building was moved. Also, if you look over to the right side of the screen there, you see a construction site going on, and Irvin Hall opened in 1825. So that must have been all around that same time. A great photograph. You can see Hepburn Hall down in the foreground there, Bishop Hall, and so on. Entering the Great Depression era, World War II, Alfred Upham, president, another one that had a long tenure here and had a very significant impact on the campus. Enrollment continuing to increase. We get up over 1,000, 3,000. I know back in the early 1900s, they did a long-range plan for the campus. And their vision at that time was that, someday might the university get to 5,000 students. And they're looking out 30 or 40 years. So they missed that a little bit, but there are reasons why. Great campus map at that point in time, in the nice Art Deco kind of style, Art Nouveau style. Fraternity houses were on campus and were expanding. You can see the fraternity rows that were developing. And of course, the activities with the fraternities as well, and the Greek week and the puddle pools, the serenades. I don't know what these guys are doing. I don't know what that one was, but something or other. But the campuses and campus life is really changing. There wasn't a whole lot of physical development at that time because we were in the Depression era, but Hughes Hall was built in 1931. It was our first chemistry building. One of the buildings you can see are starting to be built on the east side of Stoddard Elliott. And then across High Street again, another significant structure in 1931. That was Withrow Court. Basketball and phys ed was built down there. Certainly the home of Wayne Embry, one of the stars of the basketball teams. And if you were fortunate enough to be there just a couple of weeks ago, they dedicated this statue in honor of Wayne. They won the Freedom Summer Award, he and his wife. There were a lot of celebrities there, and it was really a great occasion. And you need to get back to Millett and see this. It really caps off the front of Millett Hall. However, by the late 1930s, the economy was picking up. Construction was starting to pick up. And a new person enters the scene. I will get that in a second. Sims Hall was built in 1939. Down to Hamilton Hall, 1940. Richard Hall, 1941. Part of Minnick Hall, 1941. So now the South Quad is starting to develop, and you're seeing really the whole change in the style. There was an architect from Cincinnati, Charles Solaris. He brought the Georgian architecture style and the whole layout of residential quadrangles to campus at this period in time. He will have a long career here. He didn't work for the university. He was from Cincinnati, but he had 30 or 40 buildings that were commissioned to him between that time, the late 1930s and all the way up into the early 1970s. So even though he wasn't a staff member, I would say that he was really our first university architect and campus planner. Enrollment increases up to over 3,000, but then on December 7th, 1941, the U.S. is pulled into the war. We know the impact of that. Students began, of course, the whole United States went to support the war movement. Students began enlisting in the armed forces. NROTC is there. The waves arrive in 1943. Training is going on. Radio school is there. Enrollment goes down because students and some faculty are joining the Army and going to support the war effort. 1945, the war ends. The GIs return. The GI Bill is put in place, and this has a huge impact on the country, on higher education across the country, and certainly on Miami University. So a new era, certainly in the late 1940s going into the 1950s. That's an early Du Bois bookstore down there. The Huddle was a favorite gathering place at the time. Some great images of Uptown. There were enough students on campus coming back all of a sudden, and we have our first student center, the Reservation, 1946. There's a number of temporary structures, wood frame structures, white siding were built on campus. This was one of the first. If you look in the background behind that, you can see Heron Gym back there in its relocated position, so you can get an idea of where that was. It was really between where Laws Hall and Upham Hall are today. Is where this first student center was built. The enrollment surges to over 5,000 students. The GEIs are taking advantage of the GI Bill, and they're coming in extremely fast. This is an inside shot, a nice interior picture of the res. A lot of GIs. I think the percentages shift quickly after that. By 47, 48, the enrollment surges and passes up 5,000, 5,500 and growing. This is an image of Withrow Court and a basketball game going on in Withrow Court. It's changed at this point in time. It's no longer the basketball and phys ed because it's turned into a residence hall. Believe it or not, there's a picture of that same gymnasium, Withrow Court. Bunk beds are put in there. It looks kind of like barracks, but the GIs are coming to campus so quickly they can't build the residence halls fast enough, and they actually had these. The gym was set up for students. I don't know how long that occurred, but I would say at least for a couple of semesters. And they did all right. You know, they made do, and it was probably better than the Army barracks they had come from. Another icon on campus, 1949, 1950, Upham Hall is built in the Upham Arch. We know the traditions that started and the kissing under the arch. Aerial view of the campus in 1953, a great aerial image there. You can see a lot of the temporary buildings that were there. Temporary buildings down here on Maple Street. This is Maple through here. There's Spring Street going across there. There's the original Stanton and Anderson Halls are still there. Temporary buildings here. This is where the University Center, Shriver Center will eventually get built. And then you can see up through the rest of the campus. These barracks down here were called Vet Village. I have a lot of fun slides of those. I didn't include them today for time, but that's where Vet Village was in the lodges here and to the left of that on the South Quad. And way up there, way up past the Beta Bells that are there at that point in time, there's a small building there, and that's Talawanda Residence Hall that the university purchased, did not build. It built as an apartment building. But down in that corner, I'm sure you can remember, Tuffy's Sandwich Shop was down there. This was Tuffy right down here. His son, Co Potter, Miami student and grad, and Co is still around town, and we are good friends. So Co, hope you're seeing this. He teases often. There's a picture where he's cropped out of the picture, but I like to keep Co in there. More images of that. So it became an important place. It was somewhat of an alternative for Uptown. You can see the Purity sign there. There was still a lunch and sweets place at that time. It was something a little different by the time we got here. Great Uptown shot of High Street. Rowdybush Hall was built in 1956, the administration building. I remember going in there, they'd post grades there. Down that hallway, we took care of all the business, registrar, bursar, student financial aid, information center. Remember those cubby holes down that hallway. So the early 1950s really marked a beginning of an enormous campus expansion with all the GIs coming back and the GI Bill starting at the baby boom era that we're part of, that just surged Miami's enrollment and campuses across the country. And we see that Solaris was kept very busy for the next 20 years through the 50s and 60s into the early 70s. Porter Hall in 56, Scott Hall in 57, all similar style, and brought the brand that we know of at Miami. McCracken Hall in 57, move-in day, family move-in days, always fun with a lot of students coming in. That became more chaotic. You can see Solaris's campus layout was very orthogonal, set on axes, primary and secondary axes. The views and vistas were important, and we try to continue that today. East Quad was built. Collins Hall in 52, McBride Hall in 52. Dennison came along a little later in 57, and Dorsey in 62. So it took 10 years to fill out the East Quad, but developed and again laid out in a very traditional quadrangle format. Some pictures of student life and the student rooms at that time. In 57, we said goodbye to the temporary frame structure, and the University Center is built. The Res, as we called it, later named Shriver Center. The Zebra Room. Don't know what that guy down in the lower left corner is doing. And of course, we had the bowling alley down there. That became a topic of discussion when we talked about a new center in the late 2008 and 9 period. We'll touch on that a little bit. Look at this cool guy. He's got a date in that we had the billiard room down there. I remember it well. 59 was our sesquicentennial year. Sesquicentennial Chapel was built. For that, Laws Hall, School of Business was built. The equipment they used then, radio and TV building. Education was becoming high tech. Brandon and McFarland halls. But with the exception of Brandon and McFarland, many of these buildings during this period of time were sort of standalone buildings. The quadrangles have pretty much been developed by that time. We say goodbye to Old Main, Harrison Hall. I wish I'd seen that building. I didn't have that opportunity. The new Harrison Hall is built on the same site. It has the 2 towers paying historic homage to the original building. It's the only one with 2 towers that are shaped like that. The new School of Business actually has 2 cupolas, but not symmetrical, not like that. Stanton Hall in 1961, the new Anderson Hall in 1961, Harris Dining Hall. So South Quad's being filled out. Dodds Hall. McCracken Hall is finished out as we know today in 61. It's still a favorite place and a great view and vista across to the south of campus. Move-in day. In the later years, we see what Dad beverage of choice was. Aerial view of Shriver Center and Cook Field up in the upper right, around 1959 plus or minus. The woods had not been developed yet. Down at Bishop Woods, Keller Hall comes along in 61 and carves into that a little bit. The earlier gates there, the Centennial gates are still there. A little bit of a stroll down. See Snyder's Camera Shop there. Alan Larry's is advertising for freshman girls to come in. There's the cupboard, which is the lower part. Down there, that's what the cupboard looked like. Du Bois Bookstore was still over there, and it was welcoming students. John Minnis Drugstore, right there straddling the alley with the University Shop. Looks like Bruno's Pizzas over there. Hozak's is there. Roy Young's is there. The Miami Western Theater, of course. These bring back some good memories. I hope they do for you as well. The Apothecary. Beasley's Bakery. I miss Beasley's Bakery. We have an Oxford Donut shop now, and that's it's not quite as convenient, but it's a good place too. And of course, the water tower was still standing at that time. And then there was the nightlife uptown too. There was a Jerry's restaurant there temporarily. I'd kind of forgotten about that. I think that's inside of the Boar's Head. The Purity was no longer just a sweet shop. That might be in the CI. I'm not sure. Maybe Mac and Joe's. And Mac and Joe's is still there down the alley. I had lunch there this past Wednesday. Going on with campus development, the North Quad is developed. The new Hepburn Hall, Martin Dining Hall, Flower Hall, Hahn Hall, 1964, 65, and 66. So the north part of campus is being built. The expansion of the enrollment is still increasing. We're probably up, let's see, around that time, we were probably up around 8 or 9,000 students. This was an unusual project, and that view of campus, that is King Library, Phase 1. And the original Hepburn Hall was still standing there when King Library was built. I remember that. I think it was that way when I arrived in fall of 68 as a freshman. And it was built right there. Of course, eventually, Bryce and Hepburn come down and King Library is expanded. There's a view of it. And there's Hepburn, there's Bryce, there's Hall, McGuffey over here, and there's the first phase of King Library built in there, squeezed in there. We had the great book move too. I have a picture of it somewhere of students moving all the books from Alumni Library coming over to King Library. It's a parade that went on for quite a while. King Library is eventually finished in 1971, 72. That's the image of it today, and then fills that area. I think I've got a picture of that somewhere. Keller Hall in 61 and Scheidler Hall in 1967 is built. The fall of 67 arrives, and the class of 71 arrives the fall of 67. So you're finally here on campus. Dean Hollingsworth, Dean of Men, Dean Brown, Dean of Women. They were part of the administration at that time, and I think they were kept pretty busy then. Athletic area was right in this part of campus. Of course, Old Miami Field was still there. Football games going on right there. We had baseball was there. We had the Withrow Court was there. The tennis courts were right behind the fraternities there, right behind Swing Hall. Buildings and auditorium, a significant building. This is the swim team. This is a swim team. It must have been about 70, 69 or 70, because that's my roommate my second year here. Good old Wally Morton. Shout out to you, Wally. You may be watching this. He's had a long career at Cleveland State with the swimming program up there, and it's doing great. Take care, Wally. Withrow Court, the basketball games, many memories there. Greek Week. Check out this guy. All these guys are in their football helmets, and this guy up here doing crazy. But then we've got this guy, Mr. Cool. He doesn't care about that. He wants style. As you recall, boy, those races got pretty treacherous at times. And then, of course, there's somebody like this. I'm guessing this must have been a Deke. And then the sororities are there as well, participating in their trike race that they had as part of Greek Week. The chariot races, tug of war, the puddle pool. Look at this guy down the lower left. He's trying to call timeout. You can't call timeout in tug of war. Registration. Remember, we had registrations in Withrow, in the side gyms of Withrow Court. And then 68, Withrow, the basketball program was moved from Withrow Court, moved down to Millett Hall in 68. Things were starting to change. Music was changing. We had bands. We had the twist coming along in the early 60s, beatniks. But then suddenly things started changing a little more quickly. Rock and roll really took hold. That's the Lemon Pipers there, I think, on the right. Bill Bartlett. Go-go dancers. Technology was coming in. We thought it was technology at the time. I had a pair of bell bottoms that were striped, very similar to that guy's. School of Business, this was our idea of what hardwired meant, electric typewriters. This was our idea of wireless at that time. I loved one of those portable typewriters to campus. King Library, the file catalog. This was our idea of file sharing. Morris Hall, Emerson, Tappan were built in the 60s. These are the last of the Solaris projects. That part of campus is developed. But despite all these stable appearances in the buildings, 69, 70, and 71, as we all know, were unusual times. We had a lot of fun times, serious times, joyful times, frustrating times.
Hey, Bob.
Yes.
Real quick before we move past and get into that,
Okay.
I had another question come in from Marianne, class in 1978. And she's asking, are most of the dorms co-ed now? And that she said that she lived in Hahn Hall when Miami first went her first co-ed dorms. So
I would say they are. You probably know the answer to that as well as I. I've been away from it for a while now, but yes, it's they have theme residence halls. They have really the student life and student resident life has really developed significantly in the last 20 years, and they really they can get fits for students, for what kind of lifestyle that they want and what kind of. So some of them are for foreign language students, just a whole variety. But yes, we've got just about every combination now.
Yep, they're living learning communities now.
Living learning communities, absolutely.
Yep. So it changed a lot.
Yes, and it's still changing. We'll touch on that again in just a minute.
Absolutely.
So my prelude into the buildings at the time, but it was a strange time. It was unique times when we were here, no doubt about it. We had a lot of fun, a lot of carefree kinds of things were still going on, but then at the same time, we had the Vietnam War and protests going on, and we all know the impact that had on us while we were here as well. Taking over Rowan Hall, Black student coalitions and movements with that. So, but we got through it, and with a lot of good music that we're able to listen to. That's Starstruck, I think, in the lower left corner, playing up at the Boar's Head. I think they played on Wednesday nights. And with other extracurricular activities we got through it. If you're interested, Kurt Ellison, Dr. Ellison does a really good talk and has done a lot of research on this period of time. And I'm sure he will be giving that talk again and really give this the time and attention that it could deserve. We're going to go on with the buildings, but this was pretty much our campus in 1971, the end of 71 when you all were graduating at that point. So the campus had grown a lot, all the way down to the south, with the South Quads developed at Millett Hall at the new north end of campus. So much had gone on, but there was still much change to happen. And I'll go over it fairly soon, but I want you to know sort of what and how and why the campus changed. So 71, your class, at least most of you graduated. It was 50 years ago this year. So the question is, so what happened since then? What's developed? Well, one thing, we had to rotate the campus. I've got to reorient you a little bit here. The campus shape was changing too much, and so now our new campus north is to the right, and the campus map looks like this. So Millett Hall's down here on the right, South Quad is down here to the left, and we'll finish out the rest of this with our new style campus map. And between 1971 and your spring graduation, up to today's date, we added all of this. So it's been a lot from that to that. But we'll slow it down a little bit, and I'll take you through at least pieces of it. One big chunk down there in the lower left, of course, was Western College when it merged in with Miami in 1973, the year that I was graduating. So that was certainly a big chunk of real estate and buildings to the campus. But then it continued. The tennis courts moved from where they'd been and were moved further into North Quad so that Goggin Ice Arena could be built in 1975, named after Lloyd Goggin. The ice hockey program was really taking hold well, thanks to Coach Steve Cady. Steve is certainly still around campus and still very involved with things. Steve, we thank you for bringing the hockey program to us. The Art Museum in 1978, it was a fairly controversial building, a contemporary building down the south part of campus, a good building. I had the pleasure and the honor of meeting the architect that designed that, Chicago firm, Skidmore, Owens and Merrill, Walter Nesch. Bachelor Hall in 1979. Fisher Hall comes down, and Markham Conference Center is built in the same area in 1982. Havighurst Hall, 1983, over on the western part of the campus. And then another significant thing in 83, football's moved. Old Miami Field is moved from its spot there on the corner of campus where it had been since way back with that early image I showed you, and it's moved down to the Yeager Stadium. It makes way then for Pearson Hall that is built in that corner, Pearson Hall in 1986. And in many ways, that really concluded an era with the football being there. The parades we had on game day down High Street, down to the stadium. There's a picture in the stadium. You can see the residence halls back behind it. That's Sims Hall in the background there in the East Quad. The parades and the floats on homecoming day. There you can see the stadium back there, the back of it. And we go on down in the stadium. I'm glad that I was part of that. The win over a Purdue football game, and yes, they tear the goalposts down and take those uptown. Great shot there. And then the celebrations uptown, CI, Back and Joe's, all the purity and so forth. But as is often the case, despite the end of that era, it really opens some things new. And you can see up in the right-hand side there how the whole athletic complex there has developed in the years since that time. An aerial view of what it looks like, and we'll discuss that. Give you an idea of a lot of the development that occurred down there. In 2001, the Gross Family Student Athlete Development Center was built. It's the longest named building on campus. Good facility for the athletes with a view down across the stadium. Cradle of Coaches Plaza was built in 2004. The old Miami gates were brought down to the front of Jaeger. They're still there. Baseball for women, softball, excuse me, was built in 2004. They had a great season this year, 31-2 or 3 records, something like that. So kudos to the ladies softball team here. Great job. In 2016, the Dausch Indoor Sports Center was built at the north end of Jaeger, a great facility inside. If you haven't been back to campus, you really need to come back and check out these facilities. Field hockey was added down there. You have a great field hockey program. It's not for the meek, for sure. But the tennis courts were taken down there. Varsity tennis, soccer fields are down there. So really a great campus neat area. Go up to the upper left where the Miami Manor was. The old Miami Manor back here. There was supposed to be a temporary facilities for married students. When it was built back in the 40s, early 50s. Well, that lasted for many decades until we started developing that with the Student Rec Center in 1994. That was the first major project that I was involved with as university architect. That was built in 94. Great facility for the students. Health Services Facility in 1996 as we're developing that quad. Believe it or not, that building just came down this year already, and there's something else going to go there, and we'll touch on that. A little bit of homage. The pool area behind the rec center is where I had that circle there, and the north part of Billings Natatorium had a similar windows there and a place for that. So a little nod to our past there. There's an aerial view of the development. There's the rec center. The health services is down in that area. We continue to develop that out with the Heritage Commons, all the student apartment living on campus. So in addition to residence halls, we have apartment style on campus now as well. In 2006, the Coach Steve Cady Arena, Goggin Ice Center was built right here. A great project to work on, one of my favorites. There's an inside shot of that. If you haven't seen this facility, you really need to come back and see a hockey game. This was opening night, October 6, 2006, opening night for the arena. Boy, where the pressure was on to get the project finished, but we did. Campus Avenue Garage, we actually built a parking garage in 2006. That is right over on this part of campus. 3-story parking garage. Never thought we'd see the day, but we have. Again, the layouts of these were really following Solaris's cue, and we did look at the layouts and the development of that. Important, and even new buildings over here across, it all fits into an organized kind of pattern. Green spaces are important, so we developed a green space with the new rec center and the ice arena and so forth, similar to the other areas that have been developed across campus. So views, vistas, exterior spaces all have been very important to us in our campus planning as we develop these. Developed where the old Goggin was then with this. The engineering school, Garland Hall, in 2007 was built. There's an interior view of the labs. Paper Tech is still one of them that's down in that area. I think it's changed its name now, but it says it's still there. Psychology building in 2006. Looking across the quad, the opening this way, we were looking and interested in keeping green spaces as we develop that quad. And this is the way that area looks. And believe it or not, under that quadrangle, there's a 700 plus or minus car north parking garage below that. So 2 or 3 levels of parking. Over 10 years have passed now, so I don't remember the exact number, but somewhere around that count. That was a challenging project. Laws Hall in 1959 with the School of Business. We take the School of Business, combine that into a new facility where Sims Hall was. The Farmer School of Business building, there's an aerial view of that, a really major and significant addition to that and to our very successful School of Business. Kudos to them. We have a new dean this year. The Student Center, around that part of campus, the Armstrong Student Center came along in 2014. I'll tell you just briefly what we did. I'm going to back up just for a second and talk about that. This was Rowan Hall, Gaskell Hall, Keller Hall. At one point in time, we were going to take those buildings down. We actually started developing some plans for the new structure there. For architectural challenging reasons and budget reasons, we came up with another idea, and we kept Gaskell, Rowan, and Keller, built a new structure between that and connected those three buildings into the Armstrong Student Center. There it is today. There's Rowan Hall down there, which is the main entrance into the facility. This is part of Gaskell Hall, Keller Hall over there, and then the whole new piece in the middle of it. You haven't had a chance to see that yet. I encourage you to come back and take that too. Really a nice facility for the students. We did a housing and dining comprehensive master plan in 2010. The enrollment was up somewhere around 17,000 students by that point in time, still growing a little bit. It slowed down quite a bit. But with this, we've built 3 new residence halls on the western campus, Stonebridge, Hillcrest, and Beechwoods. A little bit different architectural style over on the western campus, which indeed was different architecture. A dining hall over there, we could become a little more contemporary in architecture with western dining commons in there. A geothermal plant, all these buildings, and we're slowly turning the whole facility over. We're trying to get off the coal-fired steam plants we have and gas-fired now as well. We're going geothermal. We put in about 125 geothermal wells over in the western part of the campus, and all the heating and cooling for all those new facilities and sized for renovation of existing buildings are all controlled from that western geothermal plant we did in 2013. I'm really proud of that development and look forward to that going. Modern day move-in day, and that just happens to be my wife, daughter-in-law, and granddaughter, who was a freshman 3 years ago in Havinghurst Hall over on the western campus. Plug for them. Etheridge Hall and Maple Dining Hall were built in 2013. That's up on Maple Street behind CPA building. So that quad is finished out. We did put an arch there. I want to still have some visual view back through that. Going on, more development in the North Quad. Swing Hall came down a couple of years ago. Withrow Court, believe it or not, came down. But I'm really, I was retired by this point in time, but I'm really pleased with the way they've developed that since, and we'll show you some of those buildings. New Withrow Hall, Residence Hall, is built where Withrow Court was in 2018. And that's the front of it. Look kind of familiar to you. Withrow Hall, 2018. That's the backside from that view from Talawanda Street and looking down, which street would that be? Church Street? Anyway, Withrow Hall, and what they did was saved the cupola, the stone detailing, the entrance to Withrow Court, and incorporated that into the new building. I've actually had alums back on campus walk down Talawanda and not realize that wasn't Withrow Court. If you look closely, you know it's not, but I think they did a great job. If they took Withrow down, had to build another one. President's Hall in 2018 as well, so the North Quad's getting finished out. And that health services building has come down just this past year to make way for a new school nursing program that will be brought onto campus. It's been needed. Looking forward to the development of that. We have a program on the Hamilton campus now. It's going to all get integrated into this. I'm really out of the loop on all the details, so don't ask me about it other than what I've just shared with you. Down off 73, they've added a new indoor writing facility just this past year. So that's developing. So progress still continues. Things are still moving on, still going forward. It's still, we really think a lot about the campus composition, as I said, and where the placement of buildings occur, and progress goes on. So from the log schoolhouse in 1811 to a campus that is this size today, I will leave you with this. A closing slide. This is our campus in 2021. And one more look back. The guys in the residence hall, alums getting together. Our student years don't last all that long, 4 years, 5, but our friendships are enduring. These are shots of alums there, and I will admit that I'm in these last pictures, if you can figure out which one I am. And that's it. Any more questions? How'd I do on time?
Oh, you did great. Yeah, you did great. Yeah, so we've had a couple come in. there were a couple comments. I'll share them with you just so you know. PD Essink, who's on our 70-year committee or class of 1970 50-year committee, she looked up the question about the women. So in 1887, 2 women were admitted. President McFarland's daughter, Elizabeth, and Daisy McCullough. They could attend classes but could not earn degrees, though. So that's
well, I was close then.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay,
And then in 1900, 3 of the 16 women students graduated. And I know that Nellie Craig Walker, Nellie Craig, when she was here, she was the first African American student, black female student, and she graduated in 1905. And as you know, they've recently renamed the Campus Avenue building the Nellie Craig Walker Hall. So that name bears her name, and that's great because of her connection with the School of Education, which was there, and that used to be McGuffey School there at that building. So,
very good.
Okay, so question here. Let's see. So Tom from the class of 1966 asked, and maybe you don't know, maybe you do, when the Beta Bell Tower was built.
I do. In fact, I have images of it under construction, but I didn't include those here today. It's always a matter of which of the hundreds of slides that I have do I. It was I believe it was 1939.
Yeah, I think that's right because it matched up with their founding. Yeah, their centennial.
Right. Mm-hmm.
All right. Let's see. Here's a question from Brad. He asks, do you know when Miami started to receive funding from the state of Ohio?
Ooh, when they started receiving it.
And if you don't know, that's fine.
I don't. It was sometime in the middle of the 20th century for sure.
Gotcha.
I'm going to guess that if it wasn't before, when the GI Bill came into effect and the explosion of universities across the country and the size, that they really needed to start supporting the universities. We've kind of gone in a cycle, no support. When the university was founded, the Oxford Township was given to us in a mile square with the intention of charging rent for the development of Oxford. And that rent money was going to pay for the operations of the university. Well, that didn't last very long, and there was no inflation built into it either, which was a serious oversight. But then in the 50s, 60s, 70s, I think our state support of the institution increased. I'm going to guess it was well over 50% at some point in time for the facilities. In the last 2 decades, it has continued to decline for a whole lot of reasons, and we won't go into that today. But it is important to know that that's been one of the real challenges of public education in Ohio and across the country. And I think when we were students here in the late 60s and 70s, it was probably somewhere around 50-50. When I retired in 2016, it was under 20% state support. It was down to about 15%. And my occasional conversations with my peers that are still there, I think it's continuing to dwindle down to 13, 14, 12%. So, that's a huge story, so there's a lot.
Creeping closer to that 10%, unfortunately.
Is it down to 10% now? Okay.
It's creeping closer, unfortunately.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, let's see here.
And then the one other thing, we never got the universities never received support for the housing and dining. It was for academic administrative buildings, and that made sense. But that was the way that was set up.
Gotcha. So another question here, and you may not know this either, but Mike from the class of 1970 is asking about the house that was at 130 East High and Campus Avenue, which is the Fiji House. There was a home there served for the presidents at that point. Do you know anything about that house before it was the Fiji House and housing presidents there?
No, but one of the guys in this picture probably would that I have up there. He was a Fiji, but I don't. I really don't know prior to Lewis Place, where it was. But in Lewis Place, it was not originally the president's house as well. The university acquired that. The university rented it for a while, leased it for the president to live in, and then eventually bought it. And I think they bought it in maybe the 1920s or 30s.
Sure.
This place, but the one up in the corner, I was not aware of that one, actually. I have to do a little more research now.
Oh, that's all right.
The more you know you don't know, concerning campus history.
Exactly. All right, I got a couple more here. Let's see. Deb Scott from our class of 1970 committee, she asks, our alma mater contains the phrase, old Miami, new Miami. What's the significance of that phrase?
Glad she asked that question. And sometimes I talk about that. It goes exactly back to the closing of the university in 1874 and reopening in 1885. So Old Miami was 1809, classes started 1824 up to 1873. That's Old Miami. New Miami is 1885 to present day. So that's specifically what that's. And a lot of people don't realize the university closed for that number of years. But again, we were very fortunate that our trustees and alums were adamant that we were going to get it open again, and they were able to do so. So that's it. That's the Old Miami, New Miami.
Perfect. And I think that's all the questions we have.
Good.
And then, hold on.
No, could I ask one thing?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
While I still have some audience there. I've got a lot of images of campus. I've gone through our university archives and had a lot of help getting things over there. But if any of you out there have pictures of campus that you'd be willing to share, that would be fantastic. I can always look into images and find things of students and student life and things going on, or some images that you may not think are important, but it shows something of a building or some things going on in the background that would be of interest to me. So if you have any, Mark can give you my email address. I don't mind sharing it with you too. It might still be in the directory. I don't know if Emeriti are in the directory anymore or not, but I'd love to get some scans of what you've got.
Sure. Well, you know what I'll say is if you've got pictures and you'd like to share them with Bob, you can send those pictures to our Alumni Weekend at miamioh.edu email. That way we'll collect them there, and then we can send them and forward them on to you, Bob, if that makes sense.
And I particularly like these. If we could get some other before and after shots of when we were students and reunions back together in the same location. Those are fun images to see too.
Perfect. And that email address is popped up here on the screen. So if you have those pictures, please send them our way, and we'll make sure that Bob gets them so he can incorporate them. And you'll be famous when we do this next year.
That's right. Absolutely. And I'm hoping next year is going to be live. And I would encourage your classes 70 and 71 that we weren't able to have it live here this year. I really hope you come to campus again. The pictures I could show you today really help, but I'd love to show you the places and see the new student center and all the athletic development and the other things around this. It'd be worth the effort. Yeah.
Absolutely. And Bob, that is our goal and plan to be in person next year. So that's a good thing. And we look forward to that. One last comment that I saw here, someone asked a question on whether or not you can get a DVD of this presentation. We don't have DVDs, but this recording, it's a good reminder that this recording will stay on this website. So you'll be able to access it. It takes a while for it to download, but after it's downloaded, it'll be there and we'll be on that site for from here on forward. So you can always go back and rewatch it. And then hopefully make your way back to campus next year to experience it in person. So
the challenge with the DVD is I've got so many things layered over each other.
Sure.
You can't just look at one slide because a lot of these are 18 images on one slide that are layered. Yeah,
perfect. So, but those are the questions we have. So, Bob, thanks so much again to you.
My pleasure.
For being here and leading this presentation. Thanks as always to the Knowles of Oxford for sponsoring this as well. We appreciate them. And as usual, I learned something new in this presentation. It happens every year. So Bob, thanks so much.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Yeah. And so now we're going to move into another piece of what we're going to do here. We're going to induct our 50-year reunion folks into our Hughes Society. So each year we honor the 50-year reunion with this induction. And although we're not together in person, we want to induct those of you who are joining us right now. So as a reminder, if you're a member of the class of 70 or 71 and you registered for the webinar prior to May 27th, you should have received your Hughes Society owl pin in the mail. So if you did, please, at this point, it'd be a good time to get that pin out and get it ready. If you registered after the 27th and you're in one of those classes, your pin will be in the mail, and you should receive it soon. And the good news is that we'll be inducting the class of 70, the class of 71, and the class of 72 next year when we're back on campus for Alumni Weekend in 2022. So membership in the Hughes Society is unique. It's including only alumni who have passed the milestone of 50-year class reunions. It's named in honor of Raymond Molyneux Hughes, Miami's 13th president. The Hughes Society meets annually during Alumni Weekend. And at Miami University, Hughes initiated the first alumni reunion in 1914 and the publication of the alumni newsletter. Hughes often toured local alumni clubs, updating them on campus activities while sharing a smoker. The Hughes Society honors the man who laid the foundation for today's Alumni Association. Hughes members are referred to as OWLs, which stands for Older, Wiser Leaders. At this time, those of you who have your pins, please take out that pin and place it on your shirt or lapel or hat. And once you do that, you are now a member of our Hughes Society. So congratulations on this important milestone. And again, we will celebrate you next year on campus in our Alumni Weekend 2022, which can't get here soon enough. So with that, we have come to a close for this Alumni Weekend session. But not to worry, our next session, a spotlight on the Miami Center, begins at 2 p.m. Eastern this afternoon. We hope you join us. And if you want to hear more from Bob, he has another session today, this afternoon at 4 p.m. Eastern. So we got the 2 p.m. Miami Center, the 4 p.m. Eastern, which will be Bob's talk about the Great Seal, which is in the Armstrong Student Center. So please plan to join us for that. Remember that there are unique URLs for each session. So please refer to your viewing links emails, which are sent out 24 hours prior to the webinar and 2 hours. So those should be in your inboxes. So on behalf of the Miami University Alumni Association, thank you again to Bob for being with us this morning. And thanks to all of you who are joining us from home or wherever you may be. And as always, love and honor.